Let me talk to you for a moment. Not to the woman who's angry, not to the woman who wants revenge, but to the woman who's tired of explaining her worth to someone who already knew it and still walked away. See, heartbreak doesn't always come with shouting and slamming doors. Sometimes it comes quietly. It comes when he slowly stopped choosing you, when effort faded, when consistency disappeared, when you realized you were loving someone who had already mentally checked out. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. Trying to make a man regret losing you by arguing, begging, explaining, or proving yourself never works. Because men don't regret what they escape. They regret what they lose access to. Regret doesn't come from words. It comes from absence, contrast, and realization. So today, I'm not teaching you how to chase. I'm not teaching you how to manipulate. I'm not teaching you how to play games. I'm teaching you how to become unforgettable without saying a word. And when you do this right, he won't regret losing you because you told him. He'll regret losing you because life will remind him. Let's talk about how. Silence with self-respect is louder than explanations. Let me tell you something that takes a lifetime for many women to truly understand. The moment you start explaining your pain to someone who already chose not to listen, you give away your power. Silence, when it is rooted in self-respect, is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is not punishment. It is clarity. It is dignity. And it speaks louder than any paragraph you could ever send, louder than any late night call you could ever make, louder than any emotional breakdown you could ever have in front of him. When a man pulls away, the instinct for many women is to talk more, to explain more, to ask more questions, to try to be understood. But understand this truth clearly. A man who valued you would never need convincing of your worth. If he was present when you were giving love, effort, patience, and loyalty, then he already knows what you brought to the table. Explaining it again does not enlighten him. It reassures him that you are still available, still emotionally accessible, still willing to carry the weight alone. Silence with self-respect interrupts that dynamic. It changes the rhythm he was used to. He expected you to reach out. He expected emotion. He expected reaction. And when none of that comes, his mind starts doing the work your mouth used to do for him. Questions begin to surface in the quiet, not because you demanded answers, but because your absence removed comfort. Men process loss differently than women. Women feel it immediately. Men feel it when access is gone. Silence creates that loss. This kind of silence is not cold or bitter. It is calm. It is grounded. It says, I will not beg for clarity from someone who chose confusion. It says, I respect myself enough to step back when I am no longer being chosen. That message lands deeply because it cannot be argued with. There is no fight to win, no words to twist, no emotions to dismiss. Silence removes his ability to control the narrative. Suddenly, he cannot tell himself that you were too emotional or too demanding. All he sees is composure, and that unsettles him. When you stop explaining, you also stop feeding his ego. Over-explaining keeps him comfortable. It allows him to feel important without accountability. It lets him believe that you will always be there to soften the consequences of his behavior. But when you go quiet, you introduce consequence without confrontation. He feels the shift not as anger, but as distance. And distance forces reflection. There is a power in restraint that cannot be taught, only practiced. Every time you resist the urge to send one more message, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you choose peace over proving a point, you elevate your value. Men are not moved by emotional pleading. They are moved by emotional absence paired with strength. When you stop chasing explanations, he starts chasing understanding. Silence also protects your healing. Speaking to someone who cannot meet you emotionally reopens wounds that are trying to close. Self-respect says, I do not need validation from the source of my pain. And when you embody that, something changes in how you carry yourself. Your energy steadies. Your nervous system calms. You stop waiting for his response to determine your worth. That inner shift is visible even when no words are exchanged. A woman who explains herself endlessly appears uncertain, even when she is right. A woman who steps back with grace appears confident, even in pain. And confidence is unforgettable. Silence reframes you in his mind. He remembers you not as the woman who begged to be understood, but as the woman who knew when to walk away without noise. That image lingers longer than any argument ever could. Silence does not mean you had nothing to say. It means you chose yourself over the exhaustion of saying it to the wrong person. It means you trusted that your value does not require constant translation. And when silence is paired with self-respect, it becomes a statement so strong that no explanation is necessary. You don't glow up for him. You return to yourself. Let me tell you something that will free you the moment you truly understand it. The real glow up has nothing to do with him. It is not about making him jealous. It is not about posting pictures hoping he notices. It is not about proving that you are doing better without him. That kind of glow up still keeps him at the center. And when he stays at the center, you are still giving him power he no longer deserves. The glow up that changes everything is the one where you quietly return to yourself. Before the disappointment, before the emotional exhaustion, before you started questioning your worth, you were someone, you laughed differently, you moved with confidence, you made choices based on what felt right to you, not on what would keep someone else from leaving. Losing a man does not take away your value, but losing yourself while trying to keep him does. The glow up is simply you reclaiming the parts of you that were slowly abandoned while you were trying to love someone who wasn't fully loving you back. When a woman returns to herself, her energy shifts in ways no filter can replicate. She stops chasing validation. She stops shrinking to be accepted. She stops overgiving in hopes of being chosen. She begins choosing herself in small, consistent ways. She eats better not to look good for someone else, but to feel strong. She rests without guilt. She dresses in a way that reflects how she wants to feel, not how she wants to be perceived. That internal alignment shows. People can feel it long before they see it. This kind of glow up does not announce itself. It does not need captions. It does not need proof. It is visible in posture, in tone, in boundaries. When you return to yourself, you move differently. You speak calmly. You react less. You no longer rush to explain your emotions. You become grounded. And that grounding unsettles a man who once had access to your emotional world. He senses the difference even if he cannot name it. What truly creates regret is not seeing you happier. It is realizing that your happiness no longer depends on him. When he notices that you are no longer waiting, no longer watching, no longer emotionally orbiting his life, it forces him to confront a painful truth. You didn't lose him. You outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserved. That realization hits harder than jealousy ever could. Returning to yourself also means forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for staying too long, for ignoring red flags, for overextending your heart. Shame keeps women stuck. Healing releases them. And when you heal, your presence changes. You no longer carry desperation in your energy. You carry peace. Peace is rare. Peace is magnetic. Peace makes people reflect on what they disrupted. This glow up does not rush. It is patient. It is quiet. It is intentional. You stop trying to replace him. You stop trying to fill the space he left. You allow the space to teach you what you need. And in that space, you rediscover your standards. You remember what it feels like to be respected. You recognize how little you will accept going forward. That clarity becomes your new baseline. Men often underestimate the woman who stops trying to impress them. They mistake her silence for indifference. They assume she has moved on quickly. What they do not see is the work happening beneath the surface, the reflection, the rebuilding, the strengthening. And when they finally notice the difference, it is usually too late, because the woman who has returned to herself is no longer seeking permission to be valued. This is the glow up that cannot be undone. It does not fade when attention shifts. It does not collapse when someone leaves. It is rooted in self-connection, not external approval. And when you fully return to yourself, you stop needing him to see your worth. You start living it. You remove access, not love. Let me explain something that most women misunderstand when they are trying to heal. Removing access does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you suddenly become cold, cruel, or heartless. Love does not disappear overnight. What disappears is permission. Permission for someone to continue benefiting from your presence without showing up for you. Permission for them to lean on you emotionally while offering nothing in return. Removing access is an act of self-respect, not bitterness. Many women stay emotionally available long after a man has stopped choosing them. They answer calls, they respond to texts, they listen to his problems. They comfort him on hard days. And all of it is done under the belief that love requires endurance. But love without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. When a man knows he can still access your heart, your attention, and your emotional labor, he never fully feels the loss of you. You may be gone physically, but you are still present emotionally. And as long as that access remains, regret has no room to grow. When you remove access, something shifts. The safety net disappears. The familiar comfort is gone. Suddenly, he has to sit with his choices without the cushion of your care. He can no longer call you when he feels lonely. He can no longer lean on your reassurance when life feels heavy. He can no longer feel important simply because you are available. This absence is not punishment, it is reality setting in. Removing access is quiet. It does not require announcements. It does not involve dramatic exits or angry explanations. It simply means you stop showing up in places where you are no longer valued. You stop responding immediately. You stop engaging in emotional conversations that drain you. You stop offering understanding to someone who did not protect your heart. This kind of distance forces accountability without confrontation. Men often confuse love with availability. When you were always there, it felt normal. When you step back, it feels like loss, and loss creates reflection. He starts noticing the emotional gap, the absence of your voice, the absence of your presence in his daily life, the absence of someone who genuinely cared about him. That is when memories resurface. That is when regret begins to form, not from what you said, but from what he can no longer reach. It is important to understand that removing access is also about protecting your healing. Staying emotionally connected to someone who hurt you keeps wounds open. Every conversation resets the clock. Every interaction pulls you back into the same emotional cycle. Access delays closure. Distance allows clarity. When you step back, you give yourself space to breathe, to think clearly, and to rebuild your sense of self without constant reminders of what went wrong. This does not mean you harden your heart. It means a difference. A guarded heart still loves deeply. It simply chooses wisely. You can wish him well without being available. You can care from a distance without sacrificing your peace. That maturity is powerful. It shows that your love is not desperate and your absence is intentional. When access is removed, he feels the consequences of his behavior in a way words could never deliver. He realizes that connection requires effort. That emotional safety is earned, not guaranteed. And if regret appears, it is not because you try to teach him a lesson. It is because he finally experienced life without the benefits of your presence. Removing access also changes how you see yourself. You stop measuring your worth by his response. You stop waiting for validation. You start recognizing how much you were giving and how little you were receiving. That awareness strengthens you. It helps you understand that love should feel reciprocal, not exhausting. This is how power is reclaimed quietly, not by withholding love, but by honoring it enough to protect it. When you remove access, you send a message. Without words, your heart is not a convenience, and your presence is not unconditional when respect is missing. You become consistent, not convenient. Let me say this slowly, because this is where many women lose their power without realizing it. Men do not regret losing someone who was merely convenient. They regret losing someone who was consistent. Convenience is easy access with little responsibility. Consistency is steady presence with character, integrity, and self-respect. When you shift from being convenient to being consistent, You change how you are remembered, and more importantly, how you value yourself. Convenience often disguises itself as love. You pick up the phone no matter the time. You cancel your plans to be available. You overextend emotionally because you don't want to seem difficult. You adjust your standards to keep the peace. Over time, your flexibility becomes expected. Your effort becomes invisible. And your presence becomes something he assumes will always be there, no matter how he shows up. Consistency, on the other hand, is not about doing more. It is about being the same version of yourself regardless of circumstance. It means you are kind without being a pushover, loving without being self-sacrificing, supportive without being self-neglecting. A consistent woman does not change her standards based on how much attention she is receiving. She does not lower her expectations to stay connected. She shows up aligned with her values, not her fears. When you become consistent instead of convenient, you stop reacting emotionally to inconsistency in others. You do not chase clarity. You do not beg for effort. You do not reward half presence with full access. Your behavior stays grounded, measured, and predictable in the best way. That stability leaves a lasting impression because it cannot be manipulated or taken for granted. Men may enjoy convenience, but they respect consistency. Convenience is forgettable. Consistency is rare. When a man loses a woman who is consistent, he cannot rewrite the story in his favor. He cannot say you are unpredictable or dramatic. He cannot justify his behavior by pointing to chaos. All he's left with is the reality that you were steady and he was not. This is where regret takes root. Regret does not come from losing someone who overreacted, begged, or chased. It comes from losing someone who remained composed even when hurt. Someone who loved deeply but never lost herself. Someone who stood firm in her values even when it would have been easier to bend. Consistency also protects your self-worth. When you decide who you are and how you show up, regardless of how others behave, you reclaim control over your emotional life. You stop negotiating your needs. You stop waiting for someone else to define the relationship. You move in alignment with your standards, and that alignment creates inner peace. A consistent woman is not always available, but she is always authentic. She does not disappear to provoke reaction, and she does not overstay to prove loyalty. She leaves when respect leaves. She speaks calmly when she speaks at all. Her actions match her words, and that clarity becomes unforgettable. Men often realize too late that convenience fades. Attention shifts, options change, but consistency stays in the memory. When life becomes unstable, when relationships feel shallow, when trust feels rare, the memory of a consistent woman resurfaces. Not because she demanded to be remembered, but because her presence was grounding. Becoming consistent instead of convenient also shifts how you choose in the future. You no longer overgive to feel secure. You no longer equate availability with love. You recognize that real connection requires mutual effort. That realization changes everything. When you walk away as a consistent woman, you do not leave confusion behind. You leave clarity, and clarity is heavy. It lingers. It forces reflection. It makes a man confront what he lost, not because you made noise, but because you remained solid until the very end. You let life teach him, not your mouth. There is a moment in every woman's journey where she must decide whether she wants to be understood or whether she wants to be at peace. Trying to teach a man how he hurt you, why you deserve better, or what he lost often keeps you emotionally tied to him longer than necessary. Words feel powerful in the moment, but they rarely create lasting realization. Life does that far better than any explanation ever could. When you stop talking, you stop interrupting the lesson. Many men do not change because someone told them they were wrong. They change when they feel the consequence of their choices. And consequence is not punishment. It is simply reality unfolding without your intervention. When you remove yourself and allow life to take over, you give him the opportunity to experience what your absence truly means. Explaining your worth often invites debate. He may minimize your feelings, justify his behavior, or deflect responsibility. The conversation becomes about interpretation instead of accountability. But when you step back and let silence take over, there is nothing left to argue with. No version of the story he can twist. No emotions he can dismiss. Just the undeniable fact that you are no longer there. Life teaches through contrast. When you are gone, the comparison begins. The depth you brought, the consistency you offered, the emotional safety you created, these things are not easily replaced. He may not recognize their value immediately. Men often realize loss in stages. First comes relief, then distraction, and finally awareness. That awareness often arrives late at night, in quiet moments when the noise of replacement fades and memory takes over. Letting life teach him also protects your dignity. There is strength in restraint. There is grace in walking away without trying to be understood by someone who chose not to understand you when it mattered. You do not need to narrate your pain for it to be real. You do not need his acknowledgement for your experience to be valid. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your emotional independence. Life also teaches through absence. When you are no longer the person who checks in, listens, reassures, and supports, he feels the emotional gap. That gap is uncomfortable. It exposes what he took for granted. It forces him to face moments alone that he once navigated with your presence. And in those moments, realization grows naturally without pressure or persuasion. This approach requires patience and self-trust. You must trust that your value does not need defending. You must trust that your silence is not weakness, but wisdom. And you must trust that life is a better teacher than you ever could be. When you let go of the need to be heard, you open the door to peace. What many women fail to realize is that explaining keeps hope alive. Hope that he will finally understand. Hope that he will apologize. Hope that closure will come from conversation. But closure rarely comes from another person's words. It comes from your decision to stop waiting for them. When you let life teach him, you also free yourself from expectation. If regret comes, it will not come because you lectured him. It will come because he lived without you and felt the difference. Because the love you gave was not loud, but it was real. And real absence leaves an imprint. You do not need to say, this is what you lost. Life will say it for you in moments you will never witness. And by the time he understands, you will have already moved forward, calmer, wiser, and no longer seeking validation from someone who needed life to teach them what you once tried to explain. You heal so completely that regret no longer matters. The final stage of real power is not when he regrets losing you. The final stage is when his regret no longer holds any emotional weight in your life. Healing that deep does not happen overnight, and it does not come from pretending you are okay. It comes from allowing yourself to feel the pain fully without letting it define you. True healing is not loud. It is quiet, steady, and transformative. In the beginning, most women secretly want acknowledgement, an apology, a moment where he realizes what he did wrong. That desire is human. But if your peace depends on someone else's regret, you are still emotionally tethered to them. Healing means breaking that attachment. It means realizing that closure is not something he gives you. It is something you give yourself. When you heal completely, your perspective changes. You no longer replay conversations in your head, wondering what you should have said differently. You no longer measure your worth by how he treated you. You begin to see the relationship clearly without nostalgia blurring the truth. You recognize where you overgave, where you ignored your intuition, and where you outgrew the situation long before it ended. That clarity is freeing. Complete healing also restores your sense of self-trust. You stop doubting your instincts. You stop questioning whether you were too much or not enough. You understand that the relationship did not fail because you lacked value, but because the connection lacked alignment. That understanding removes shame. And without shame, there's nothing left for regret to feed on. As you heal, your emotional reactions soften. His name no longer triggers a physical response. Memories lose their emotional charge. You can think about the past without feeling pulled back into it. That neutrality is a sign of real progress. Indifference is not coldness, it is emotional freedom.